Welcome to Crime Most French, a weekly podcast taking you through intriguing cases carried out on French soil. Researched and narrated by Cedric and rudely interrupted by me, Melanie. We're the true crime podcast All the Lions. Crack open le vin and let the mayhem commence. Today we're talking about two of my favourite things, Paris and drag queens. This is our most contemporary case so far, as the crimes took place in the 1980s. These crimes are brutal and saw the murders of a vulnerable section of society, and sadly all the families of these crimes didn't get their day in court to see justice being done. He was known as the monster of Montmartre, but it's to the French overseas territory that we'll see why Thierry Paulin went from an unwanted byproduct of an unexpected pregnancy to a serial killer preying on the old of Paris. Many of you will be aware of the shape of France. You know, the boxy-shaped country over the other side of the English Channel, and the gateway to Europe from the Channel. But there are parts of France and far-flung places all over the globe referred to as overseas territory, and Martinique in the Caribbean, which is Department 972, is one of them. Have you ever been to Martinique, no?
No, my dad has been to Martinique, not me. I was going to say that it used to be said that Victoria's empire was the empire on which the sun never set. And there's only one country in the world now which is true, it is France, because there's territories in every time zone.
Yeah.
All the way to the US and the Pacific.
Mm-hmm. Well, the Pacific we know about at the moment, given the political climate.
Oh, New Caledonia, yes.
Yes, I mean, we've got, all the way down there, which is quite close to, is it in between?
It's between Australia and New Zealand.
And then you've got all the way up to...
We have all the Pacific Islands in Polynesia.
Yeah.
And then you have the islands near Madagascar.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have the Southern Islands around the South Pole. There's a few of them. One of them is called Kerguelen. Then you have islands in the Atlantic. Then you have the Caribbean and Saint-Pierre-et-Miquelon, which is in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other side of Mexico, you have, I think it's called Pickleton Island, or Clipperton Island, which is technically French, but really it's just an island nobody wants. And then you go back to the Pacific and Polynesia again.
Yeah. I mean, what's weird to me is we can jump on a plane and fly over the ocean and go to Martinique or Guadeloupe.
When you Polynesia and land in France, yes.
Yeah, and you don't need a passport. You're still in the same country. It still has all the same road signs, all the same laws, all the same shops. Everything's the same.
Yeah, you still use the euro.
Yep. So anyway, so it's over to the capital, Fort-de-France, in November 1963, where Thierry Paulin was born. As I said, he was an unexpected baby, and his mother was barely older than a child herself. After the birth, his father went back to metropolitan France, and Thierry was then brought up by his maternal grandmother, and she was running a restaurant and really didn't have a lot of grandma time to spend with Thierry, and eventually after 10 years she could no longer cope with him. So Thierry was then punted on to his mother, who was then remarried, and she had a family of her own. So things had moved on for her. And Thierry was not the best at fitting in. And also his mother seemed to be quite a harsh disciplinarian. She would... the morning wake-up call was a cold pan of water thrown over him when he wasn't getting up out of his bed.
Yeah, but at the same time, you know how teenagers are. Impossible to get out of bed. So.
Trying to... And apparently one year there was even no Christmas presents for him on the 25th of December, which seems a bit harsh, but I'm not going to judge.
No, maybe he's been bad.
So even the mother finally had enough of him. This was culminated in him taking a knife to school and threatening the headmaster. And unfortunately, he was only 12 at the time.
Okay, so he started early.
Yeah. So that was enough. He was then shipped back to the mainland, back to metropolitan France, down to the beautiful city of Toulouse,
Okay.
which is known as, is it the Rose City?
The Pink City. Yeah.
Pink City, yes. The buildings are a lovely colour down there.
It's pink.
Pink granite, isn't it?
It can't be pink granite. I don't know actually. It's either pink granite or pink calcare. I don't know. It is. No, it must be pink granite. It has to be pink granite.
It's the buildings aren't hugely ornate, which would kind of suggest the stones are very hard.
Yeah, and also they're not being eaten like in
Edinburgh.
Din Village in Edinburgh. So,
Yes.
So it must be pink granite.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, there's pink granite up in Peterhead,
Okay.
so it makes sense that you do get pink granite. We digress as per usual. Now, it probably isn't going to come as much of a surprise, but Thierry didn't really settle in well, and he was doing really badly at school. So after school, he tried to do a couple of apprenticeships, but didn't seem to have the gumption to stick in there. So he then decided he would go off and do his national service, and he joined the parachute regiment.
They didn't have the choice because you can only delay it if you're still studying or if you have kids. That's the two reasons why you can delay your national service.
Yeah, national service, I think, is national service still?
No, they stopped it in 98. It's like a half-day video now.
Okay.
To tell people if you want to do something, you can enroll, and this is the kind of stuff you can do, and
come and serve your country.
Yeah, if you want to, but that's about it now. There's also it's a lot more diverse than it used to be. It used to be that it had to be in one of the army corps, so it was about the Air Force, the Navy, the Army, the Gendarmerie, or the Fire Brigade in Paris.
Yeah,
that was really your 5 choices. But now you can do it as a civilian as well, so you can do civil stuff. Pretty much anywhere you want, really.
Yeah.
So it's very, very different from what it was at the time.
Yeah, it always amazes me that the gendarmes are essentially, military police. But
they are army, yes.
Yes, and they very much work
like the army.
Yes, with the army, but they also work with civilians all the time. I mean, we had a car accident a couple of weeks ago, and the gendarmes immediately turned up.
I called them.
But yes, and that's what I'm saying. But for military police, they tend not to work outside, or like a military base as such.
Yeah, but they are not military police. They are army that fulfill the role of police.
They do both jobs, kind of thing. We do have police in big cities.
Some big cities, big cities, yes. That the major ones, yes. But most of the country is covered by the gendarmerie, which is army, and they behave like the army, and they have an army structure.
Well, put your surprised face on, because things didn't really go well in the army. Paulin was mixed race, and it was the 80s. So being what he was kind of a target already. And then if you compound that with the fact he was a bit of a gregarious bisexual, and that's never ever going to go down well with the rank and file. So he was very much bullied by the more straight-laced hetero white males that were probably in the dominance at that time. And he'd obviously had enough when he decided to attack an old lady in a grocery store and tried to rob her at knife point. There was only one small fly in the ointment with that. He obviously had no face covering, and the grocer knew who he was.
So he's not very good at planning this kind of stuff, clearly.
And also ended any chance of him staying in the military, and he was had a dishonourable discharge. So here we are. He must have been 19 by that point, and he decides that as the national service and the army didn't work out, he would head off to the bright lights of Paris. So his mother now had moved from Martinique and was now living in a western suburb, so he went to stay with her. And not really surprisingly, things were tense. Seems to be the running kind of theme. He never seemed to fit in wherever he settled. It was at that point that we have to kind of like haul out our hip pads and false eyelashes and stilettos, as he gets a waiting job at a renowned nightclub called Le Paradis Latin, which is in the 5th arrondissement, which is in the Latin Quarter, hence the name. And it's still there, and it's still under the same name, and has been since 1973, when it had a big, giant, massive refurb. There has been a theatre on that site since 1803, and interestingly enough, after it burnt down in 1870, it was rebuilt by Gustave Eiffel.
There's a song from the early 80s or late 70s called Paris Latino. I wonder if that's related to that club.
Yeah, it could be, because I mean, it was obviously a kind of like an epicenter for drag artists, which probably weren't, drag queens at that point.
No, they would have become transvestite at the time.
Yeah. So it was while he was waiting that he took to the stage, and he loved to lip sync along with the likes of Eartha Kitt. And apparently his mother once turned up for his performance, and it lasted a whole 2 minutes. She obviously didn't approve of what her son was doing. But as we say, I mean, this kind of form of entertainment was certainly on the fringes of society. It was not the happy in its 17th season or whatever,
RuPaul.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, RuPaul really has dragged drag into the mainstream, and it's just a bunch of fun now, isn't it, really? But back then, not so much. It's at that point we see a guy enter his life, Jean-Thierry Maturin, who is a 19-year-old French Guyanan who's got a bit of a drug problem. It's said that Thierry also used drugs, but he wasn't as heavy as his lover, and he also sold drugs on the side, I guess, waiting at this club. Obviously didn't pay too well.
Also, most drug users are also drug sellers. So.
Yes, but I think if you're wise, I think you don't imbibe too much, because you have to be quite clear-headed to kind of keep the books and stuff. Anyway, Paulin dreamed of opening his own cabaret place, so he really wanted to
Be RuPaul.
Yeah, exactly. And
RuPaul would have been around at the time as well.
RuPaul would have been
Probably.
around at the time, but probably just in Atlanta. I don't even know if he would have been in New York by that point. But I mean, he was kind of he burst onto the stage in the very early 90s, maybe very late 80s, so not too far away.
Mm-hmm.
So it would have been huge in the clubs in like Paris is Burning, where the nightclub is called Paris is Burning. This is an excellent documentary if you're ever wanting to dip your toe into finding out about drag. He and Jean-Thierry very much lived the lifestyle associated with cabaret artists. He was drinking, snorting coke, partying very, very hard. And his mother had kind of reached the limits with the behaviour and kicked both of them out. And it was while the two of them were jobless and living in a hostel that Paulin fell back on the robbery idea, and he picked the same members of society, obviously the old and the vulnerable. So him and Jean-Thierry started targeting old ladies and robbing them. These first wave of 6 murders were very brutal. I don't really particularly want to go into any details, given the fact it was in the 1980s and families are still around, but they were horrible. They were mostly around about the 18th arrondissement, which is Montmartre, which is the very arty area of very bobo, isn't it?
Although the bobos tend to like the nicer arrondissement. 18 is not that nice.
Is it not? No.
No, they prefer 8s, 5 and 6, which are the posh ones.
Yeah, if you're ever wanting to have a cheesy portrait done of yourself, there's always heaps and heaps of them around about there. So apparently even the mayor of Paris was alarmed by the fact that, 6 murders had taken place. So he was actually offering bodyguard details to these older ladies.
That would have been Chirac at the time.
Ah, okay.
And fun fact, Chirac is the first mayor of Paris. He was elected in 1976, but he was the first since 1792.
Wow. That seems to be the new thing, because the London mayor didn't start until kind of like 20 years ago as well.
There used to be a mayor in Paris. It's just that when the revolution happened, they realized that Paris was usually the start of the revolution, so they just stopped having some kind of local government in Paris to try to stop revolutions in Paris. That didn't work. There was one in 1830, one in 1848, there's been so many since, but anyway, that's why there was no mayor in Paris. So Chirac was the first mayor in like 300 years.
But I think what ultimately is very sad is these murders of these old ladies, they didn't have vast fortunes. And it's not going to be something that they could sustain their lifestyle, get through quite a lot of robberies at that point to cover it. So after we have 6 murders, as is mostly around about the 18th arrondissement, and earn him the name of the monster of Montmartre, he has burnt his bridges with his mother, so he decides to head down to Toulouse again, to his father's house.
But he had been kicked out of his father's house already.
No, well, but he'd left to join the army from his father.
Oh, he wasn't kicked out? I thought he was kicked out by his dad.
No, it's just his mother that had kicked him out. I mean, I think his father was probably near the end of his rope with him.
Okay.
The two of them, Thierry and Jean-Thierry, turn up in Toulouse, and his father is not accommodating to his lifestyle at all, and point blank refuses to have Jean-Thierry in the house. He just says, no, you're not having a lover in the house. So that essentially escalated to a big argument, and the two of them split up. Thierry, Poulain himself, decided just to stay in Toulouse. This is when he was still carrying on trying to work on the idea of having a cabaret and a whole family of drag queens, and he would be the mother of this troupe. So he eventually decides it's just not really happening. He ends up heading back in 1985 at that point to Paris again. So leaves Toulouse.
Okay.
Finally closes that door, and he's.
So does he pick up Jean-Thierry on the way?
No, they're never.
I see. They never meet again.
No, they're never again.
Ah, okay.
That's it. It's a sad demise of a brutal and awful relationship that I don't think anybody would cry about. He's now couch surfing. Before couch surfing was a thing, he was staying on friends' sofas. And the whole drag thing, well, it was a drag and nothing was really happening with it. So what does Thierry know? What does he know? How does he know how to get money? This is the start of the second wave.
Mm-hmm.
The poor ladies of Paris are once again left in his sights. He starts to follow them, but unlike the last time, the next 7 seem to be more straightforward. He just is very much interested in getting their money and not torturing them this time.
It could be that the torture was Jean-Thierry's influence.
Could be. I mean, you do, if you look at the kind of like Clockwork Orange, and they're violent when they're together kind of thing. Yes, it could very well be that. And as I say, it was all just to fuel his coke habit. And it's at this point that Poulain has quality issues with the coke that he's buying. He's not happy with what is being cut with, obviously. And in 1986, he goes round to have a quiet word with his dealer. And when I say a quiet word, he takes a baseball bat round and basically pummels the crap out of the guy, who, unlike an old lady, obviously has a lot more stamina. So he goes bollocks to that and heads to the police and basically says, okay, this guy has come round and beaten 7 shades of crap out of me. And this is when Poulain feels the full force of the law, and he ends up in prison for a year. So he's now serving hard time. And when he's in prison, he discovers that he's HIV, he has AIDS. And that's obviously kind of like the start of the descent, because this is the 1980s. This is not, they haven't discovered any cocktail of drugs to try and extend your life. They don't know how to make it controllable. So at that point, we know it's a death sentence for him. So after he comes out of prison, obviously, he goes and visits the families, and he makes amends with all these old ladies that he's killed. No, of course he doesn't do that. He doesn't do that at all, in fact. This is kind of like an HIV spree. This is him wanting to go out in a massive blaze of glory. I have an image of Gatsby in my head. He wants to throw himself a big, huge birthday bash. And so, once again, he goes to the bank of Old Granny. And at one point on the 24th of November of 85, he robs 2 ladies and he leaves them for dead.
Okay.
Now, that was his mistake. He leaves one of them for dead. But sadly for Poulain, and happily for the old lady, she survives. And not only does she survive, she gives the police an excellent description of Poulain. Because Poulain, as I mentioned before, is biracial. And at this point in his life, he has a bleached blonde flat top. And the old lady, from her own lips, describes him as Carl Lewis. Because Carl Lewis had a flat top at the time, it wasn't bleached blonde. So he would have stood out in Paris. And it was at this point, one of the local inspectors was walking down the road and spots Poulain because of this old lady's description. So there we go. He's arrested, and the old ladies of Paris can breathe a sigh of relief, thankfully. And he sings like a bird when he's arrested, and not only does he sing like a bird for himself, but he tells the authorities about Mathurin and his involvement in the first wave of murders. He's then arrested, and he was given 18 years for his part in the murders.
Okay.
Of 6 old ladies.
What year was that?
That was in 86.
86, okay.
I think it was probably 87 by the time, because it was the end of 86 when he had this party. So it must have been in 87.
So 18 years will make it 2005.
He was released on parole in January 2009.
Okay.
So this guy not only, I think, didn't spend enough time in prison, he's now out. He's still alive. I don't know if he's atoned. I don't know if he's rehabilitated.
I don't see why.
But yeah, rather annoyingly. And I think even more infuriatingly for these families, Poulain dies in prison. He never reaches the court at all. He dies in prison in April 1988 of AIDS, of something that his body's obviously unable to fight off. And sadly, no justice has been done, which I think is sad. Given the nature of the crime, it's not really surprising that there has been a film made about it, and that was in 1994, so quite soon after it, called I Can't Sleep, directed by Claire Denis, and it's received favourable reviews. It didn't have anyone famous in it. It got 75% on Rotten Tomatoes, so that's counted as fresh. So I don't know if you want to go and view the fictitious events of murdering old ladies, which to me seems a bit macabre, but whatever floats your boat. But to me, I think it just demonstrates the fact that just how vulnerable old ladies are, and how really robbing them is not a financially viable way to live your life, and is never going to be able to sustain a great lifestyle.